Hi, I'm Tim, welcome to our channel, and thanks for logging on. Today, we have a family feud, Patek Philippe Nautilus, complications. It's the 5712 versus the 5726, both in stainless steel. Let the games begin. Okay, we're going to talk about the elder statesman of this pair first, because the 5712 isn't exactly an ancient reference at Patek, but it has its roots in the original Moonphase Power Reserve 3712 of 2005, and a version of this complication has been in production ever since. It's easily the more compact and dress-oriented of the two watches in the collection. Now you can see on my wrist 16 centimeters in circumference, and let's zoom out a little bit, give ourselves a bit more contrast and a bit less light. You can see that this watch wears almost ultra thin. It's 40 millimeters in diameter, and you can see that the timepiece is very flat, measuring only 8.6 millimeters thick. It's only slightly thicker than an AP-15202 Jumbo, and it really does feel like the Jumbo in this comparison. Compared to the 5726, which has a feeling of a massive sports watch on the wrist, this is a timepiece that feels, eyes closed, more like a vintage watch or dress watch. Now 8.6 millimeters thick, 40 millimeters in diameter, not including the wings, which do extend to any Nautilus. The timepiece is a compact 46.3 millimeters from lug to lug, and as you can see, there's really no flare to the bracelet. You can pull it straight down around the wrist, and that's something you're going to find we can't really do with the 5726. Now the model as you see it on my wrist is the 5712 1A-001. It's a handsome piece, and in a lot of ways it feels on the wrist more like a 3700 Jumbo would if you had a 3700 Jumbo in this test. It's nicely made. As you can see, the essential features of the design, the bracelet, are exactly as Gerald Genta envisioned back in 1976 with the original Jumbo. Perfect integration of bracelet. You have the large links, you have the minor links in high polish, the contrast between the two, the hand finishing of every element, including perfectly aligned bevels. You have a deployant clasp on both of these watches, and as you can see, there are ceramic pin snaps inside this bracelet. And this is interesting. It's no longer true of the watch. Today, you have pin sleeves to assemble the bracelet, but prior to 2012, you would get screws in the removable links. I'm not going to hold that against the 5726 in this test, which is a newer watch, as the current 5726 and 5712 both do have pin sleeve bracelets. But if you were picking between the exact units in this test, the actual serial numbers I'm holding, this watch would have a slightly higher quality bracelet simply by virtue of those screws. The dial features that combination of small seconds, radial date, and Moonphase with power reserve that is characteristic of this particular variant of the 240 micro rotor. It's a good looking combination, although it is calculated to symmetry. You're either going to love or hate the imbalance. It does crowd the dial substantially. On the other hand, it has everything you could want. It has practical complications in the small seconds, the date, and the power reserve, and it has the romantic one in the form of the Moonphase. Now the watch has 60-meter water resistance, which is interesting because fundamentally it doesn't seem that it's of different construction than the annual calendar. You have pusher adjusters on the flank of both, but that one's 120, this one is 60. Now when you look in the case back, we'll get as close as we can. I'm going to open up the bracelet one more time. But when you go inside, you can see that the display caseback of this one is much more complete than the center rotor of the annual calendar. The 240 gives you the slim profile of a manual wind. It gives you the display caseback vista of a manual wind, but it also gives you the convenience of an automatic system. So if you're going to wear this watch every day, that is wonderful to have. So that's something to keep in mind when comparing these two watches. If you love to look at your movements, this is the easier one to see. Now let's talk about the annual calendar. The Nautilus Annual Calendar arrived at Baselworld in 2010. The model I have right here, the 5726 1A-001, has been discontinued as of 2019. There is now a -014 that's basically this watch with a blue dial. So just keep that in mind. The basic watch is still available, just not with this specific gradient silver argent dial. Throwing this watch on the wrist, immediately I'm overcome by the feeling of wearing a sports watch. It's at bare minimum the difference between an Audemars Piguet 15202 Jumbo and a 15400, and it might even be as pronounced in terms of feel and solidity and heft as the difference between a 15400 and an offshore on a full bracelet. Everything about this watch is larger. 40.5 millimeters on paper, it doesn't seem like it's a bigger Nautilus, but you can feel that it is. There's a lot more metal here. It's 11.5 millimeters thick, so you can see it's substantially chunkier, though it still fits underneath the cuff. 51.3 millimeters lug to lug, that's a real difference. And the difference isn't really in the size of the case, it's in the flare of the bracelet. You can see compared to the 5712, I cannot pull this bracelet down all the way. It's not downwardly flexible, so I can pull it 90 degrees to the case band. And you'll also note, let me bring back the 5712 so I can show you exactly what I mean. But you can see, in contrast, the bracelet's much more flexible on the micro rotor watch. You'll also note that the substantial difference between the two, almost 3 millimeters, is visible in profile. But the other feature I want to show you is that the individual links of the bracelet are dramatically different in thickness. When I talk about the bracelet of the 5726 feeling like an offshore compared to a standard Royal Oak, you can see exactly what I'm talking about right here. It's easily evident even to the eye. This is something that you can judge without putting it on the wrist. You can see it from an arm's length. Now, jumping back to the annual calendar real quick, we should mention that this watch, 120 meters water resistant, and sometimes a little bit of a puzzlement because it looks like it's made the same way. They both have screw down crowns and through fittings for pushers for their calendars. All the same, the watch is a bit more robust. The dial features better balance. As you can see, it has that sort of bilateral symmetry where you could split it right down the center if you wanted to, and whereas the original 5712 had a sort of gradient blue metallic, the original 5726 had that argent silver, or maybe ardoise as IWC would call it. Both watches have white gold hands and indices. The annual calendar is friendly. It's a Patek Philippe complication invented by them in 1996, so to have their design icon, the Nautilus, with their original complication innovation, the annual calendar, it's a wonderful combo to have. Interestingly, the Moonphase has a accuracy of 122 years, so you'll reset it every 122 years, whereas the annual calendar, the actual date, and month, need to be reset every year during the jump from February to March. Now turn this one over. You can see this one has the more contemporary pin sleeve assembly inside. Otherwise, the clasp construction is literally identical, right down to the clamshell and the internal ceramic pin snaps. But you can see that the case back of this watch is quite different from the 5712. Half the movement is always going to be obscured by the rotor itself, and as you can see, it is a higher beat rate, whereas the 5712 operates at 21.6, this one operates at 28.8. So a center rotor automatic and the movement a little bit thicker, a little bit tougher. The finishing standard on both is the same, and I should mention that both do bear the Patek Philippe crest today. So from the factory, the 5712 and 5726 are both rated as accurate to -3 plus 2 seconds a day or better per the Patek Philippe seal. Both feature silicone hairsprings, gyromax balances, all of the goodies, and 6-position adjustment. So today, technically, the watches have similar specifications and all of the same technologies. So let's talk about the advantages. First, let's talk about the 5712. This is an interesting watch. Again, feels more like a vintage watch, feels more like a dress watch, and looks the part as well. I would say realistically, it's so much thinner and so much more compact from side to side without the bracelet flare that this one's more elegant, more compatible with a cuff, and a better option if you have a wrist smaller than 14.5 centimeters circumference. So very small wrist, you want this watch. Ultimate in elegance, you want this watch. Let's talk about the open, unobstructed caseback. I'm all about the micro rotor. You can see all for which you've paid right here. The finishing standard is the same on both watches. You can just see it all at once on the micro rotor, Advantage micro rotor. I would mention that this watch, in the form you see it here, is still offered, whereas if you want to get this particular dial, it's been discontinued. It's now a blue dial. So if you want to go out and buy one new and get the full new Patek Philippe experience, you're going to wait, but you can still buy this model. I'll also mention that because this model was made from 2006, whereas the annual calendar only arrived in 2010, you can get older versions of this watch with both the screw-fixed links in the bracelet and the Geneva hallmark on the movement, and a lot of folks like to double up those two features. They find it's just a little bit more romantic, and in the case of the bracelet, a bit more convenient and practical. So on that count, Advantage 5712. Less money. This is a watch that still costs new $44,050 US, pre-owned about $78,000 to $80,000 US, whereas if you want to go out and pick up a pre-owned 5726, it's a watch that sells new for $45,930 and pre-owned for about $105,000 to $110,000. So you can get the iconic Nautilus look, even pre-owned at a markup, for a lot less money if you buy the 5712. Now, let's talk about the advantages of the 5726. Okay, very cool watch in every respect. The calendar complication is far more practical than the combination of scattered complications on the 5712. It has a much better balance about its dial, there's no doubt. This is all ordered. All of this is designed to be symmetrical. It's even more symmetrical than a 5711 with its off-centered date. So this is a watch that you can look at, and if you love love that order and balance and symmetry. This one's got that going on. I'll also mention water resistance, 120 meters versus 60. Now both watches are swimmable, but realistically, if you're going to use your sports watch for situations where you might dive off a board or fall off a jet ski or water skis, this is the one you want, so more rugged. Also, this is a watch that's more sturdy in its construction. This bracelet feels like a sports watch bracelet, and I do have more confidence in it holding up over time if it's used with borderline violence than I do in the bracelet on the 5712. It's also, as I mentioned, just a unique combination. Patek's design icon is the Nautilus. You could maybe argue that the 5196 Calatrava is the other pillar of Patek, but the Nautilus is the design that everyone recognizes. It's Patek's Royal Oak, it's Patek's Moonwatch, it's Patek's Navitimer, it's Patek's Reverso. So to get Patek's own complication, the annual calendar, in the ultimate Patek shape is a wonderful combo. I'm not sure Patek has any kind of monopoly or mindshare hegemony in the world of power reserves and moon phases. So this is really a quintessential Patek Philippe combo on your wrist in a single watch. So which one do I prefer? Frankly, I like the feel and the slender profile of the Micro Rotor 5712. If the case back alone were deciding the matter, I would go with the 5712, but I like the practicality, the durability, and the unique combo of design and engineering that I get with the Annual Calendar Nautilus. So you guys, let me know, which of the two would you pick for your own? Would you buy the 5726 or would you buy the 5712? Tell me in the comments below. Unexpectedly, the 5712 wins the loom shootout against the 5726.